Hey everyone, I'm Ross, and we're going to look at the epics and release planning activity in the remote design sprint. Let's get into it. What we're going to look at now is the handover. So this is where we look at the epics and release planning. The team have completed the design sprint. They've made their decisions. They've got feedback from users. They've done a load of work to get here. But now we need to finish as well as we can and prepare things for production. So what you can start doing as a team is look at the map and start collecting the epics. And the epics are essentially the key parts of this experience. And if a production team needed to make something, what parts of that would they need? They're pretty much buckets, and you need to categorize what those buckets look like. This all comes into their sprint planning and when they start sizing things up, sharing with the team and starting work. So for the first 20 minutes, I usually get the technical lead, whether it's a lead developer or engineer, and they start guiding the team to working out what these epics are. So if this app has notifications, then we create an epic for notifications. It may require a bit of discussion to work out what to call this thing. But say if there was a registration, then you'd need some kind of user management. You need a database, you need several fields, you need a way to manage, but also edit the user information. Think about your data. Where's the data going to come from? Are you going to use third-party integrations? Depending on what those are and what APIs are supported. A support desk, early on success. Support desks are a great idea for a new product because it gets to expose some of the problems that people are finding, and it will give you that from a user point of view, but also to ensure that people are actually getting their needs met with your product. And then if your product has posted job, or say you could post an item, you could start putting those epics together. So you may have quite a number of epics. I've just put 5 up there. And often I'll put an icon on there so that people can visually represent them. Okay. When we've got our list of epics, and I spend about 20 minutes on that with the team, then we can start prioritizing on a graph. And this is the graph that I use. You've got a complexity on the axis. You know, is it low complexity? It's quite easy to put together. Maybe this technology exists in the organization already, and that's why we include a lead developer in the team. Or maybe it's highly complex. Maybe it's out of our control. Maybe it is a third-party integration. And then along the bottom, we've got impact. How important is it to the user? How is it going to help them solve their problems? So you might say that posting an item is important, because if they can't post an item, then they can't get the value from the app, they can't start selling, they can't start making money. So the impact is high, complexity might be midway. So dragging down your epics, you can start plotting them on this graph. And that helps in a number of ways. For the production team, they can look at what might require more time or less time. And with the team, it gets them to think about what might start going in release 1, release 2, release 3, and start working out how this can get to the market. Ideally, you don't want to launch with everything. The problem with that is creating everything in a very waterfall process means that you're not actually providing value to customers until 6, 12 months, maybe longer. If you start sharing those critical features early on, then users are getting value from it. You're coming to the market earlier. You can start getting some return. So that's why we plot them on this axis. Okay. So what's next? Then we want to cover the technical considerations we need to investigate. Of course, some of these epics, we're in the abstract. They may be existing epics if it's an existing product, but there may be some new considerations that we need to bear in mind. And these can be a kind of list of things that the production team can investigate, can research, and find answers to. So, for example, if you've got a data set or a data source, how might we validate the data? How do we know that it's correct? Is our API able to do this? Some teams may assume we're able to do things because they can see it, but if it's not in the API, it's going to be very difficult to expose that. And for example, if there were a new piece of functionality, maybe threaded comments, came through in the competitor analysis, and it's something that looks valuable to users, how could we do that with current functionality? And can we do that? So you start creating some considerations for the team to investigate. And it's a better way to start those investigations within the sprint because it's top of mind. So a few minutes to do that. And then we use the design thinking boat. That's what I call it. Mine looks quite like a yacht. And we use this to put together risks and assumptions. This activity can be pulled out in no matter of things, or all matter of things. You can use it to use as a model to form a conversation, maybe even do a retrospective. And what it can do is start sharing some of those areas that need consideration going forward. So, what can help us move forward? The team's desire to change. Maybe this has been a team that hasn't been able to push further and release products to market. Maybe it's a new team and they want to start getting things out there. Maybe this has been a new team put together and they think that this team has been a fantastic group to put together this product and find some really key insights from users. What could drag you back? If you don't communicate the value, maybe API constraints. And this activity, as a facilitator, I guide them through each bit, probably start with what can help us move forward, what could drag us back, what can sink us. And it's just a model to help guide conversation and really capture those views. And then finally, which again, the technologist can lead, or the product manager, is bring the epics over and list out the user stories. So there is a way from Mural to paste these into Trello or into a list within Excel or any other spreadsheet. That can be useful for the tech team if they use those tools. You can start putting together those user stories, and production teams like that because it's a more user-centered way of framing the activity that a user is going to do. So, for example, in our case, as a user, I to quickly and easily list my item. As a user, I want to see how many people have liked the item. So you take each epic, you start writing user stories for them to explain the features in a user-centered point of view. And then we get to prioritization. So we can start prioritizing those user stories to what needs to be in MVP or phase 1, phase 2. MVP sometimes isn't a shippable product, so use it at your own discretion. You may say minimal shippable product. Maybe I just invented that. But you can start putting these stickers on each of the cards. So maybe that comes later. Maybe that's not needed for first release. And maybe phase 2 is as a user, I can see how I can see what people have. So okay. So at the end, you've got your prioritized set, and you've quite easily gone through most of the areas that a production team needs to take the design sprint forward into production. Production is a different cadence. You keep momentum, but it's a different pace. But the team now has exactly what they need. But also interview the team before you start the design sprint and say, hey, what do you need out of this? What can help you take this forward? And towards the release of it, do a retrospective and find out, okay, how long was production out of the sprint? If you find 4 months, start doing a map of those 4 months, and you can start identifying opportunities to tighten those 4 months. Maybe there was too much to and fro from the designer to the developer who needed certain areas. Maybe that calls for a design system to be put together that any of the front-end designers or developers need to put together. Maybe it's identified that you had a weekly meeting, which kind of set the tone of how fast this is. Maybe you don't need a weekly meeting. Maybe you need daily stand-ups. So always be reviewing, always be retrospectively looking at the work you've done and seek improvements to it. But essentially, here is your handover, and that can go forward into production. And that's what the epics and release planning activity looks like in the remote design sprint. If you like this video, give it a like and consider sharing it with someone who needs to see it.